Hello, friends, and welcome to the 16th episode of Dust James' weekly assault on U.S. empire, where you can find working class, anti imperialist, revolutionary analysis. Um, First off, happy Victory Day, the fifth anniversary of the defeat of the German Nazis. Speaking of victories, we're going to be talking about the recent um, defeat of the coup attempt by the people of Venezuela. And for that, I have a guest with me today, R Suarez, an embassy protector, host of Vanguard Youth Radio, host of a Facebook show, The Red Zone. Welcome, R Suarez. How are you today?
Pleasure. I just want to make clear I don't officially represent the Embassy Protection Collective or embassy protectors. So when I talk about the embassy protectors, I'm just speaking about myself as the co-director of a documentary about the embassy protectors. But of course, I took actions with the embassy protectors and at times acted as an embassy protector when I was at the Venezuelan embassy in Washington, D.C. last year, for those that are not familiar.
Right on. Um, I understand. Let's see. Okay, first off, what happened Sunday morning in Venezuela?
Yeah, so I believe actually it was Sunday night. It
Okay.
happened Sunday night and early Monday morning. Yeah, so the dates, I want to make sure I'm still looking at my calendar. I want to be accurate here.
All right, well, let's look at that.
Yeah, that's right. So
Okay,
it was
go
the
ahead.
3rd and the 4th. It was the 3rd and the 4th of May. So it was Sunday night and early morning hours of Monday.
Okay. So what happened?
Yeah, so there's a mercenary, which is being generous. He's really a terrorist, but there's this guy named Jordan Gordu. I believe I'm pronouncing his name right. Anyways, Jordan works, well, not works, he's a CEO. I think he's the co-founder of a firm, security firm called Silvercore. And that firm is actually, and I didn't get a chance to look up his name, but anybody can look it up. Popular Reasons written about it. That firm is connected to the chief of security, or the person who's in charge of the bodyguards of Donald Trump himself. And also,
Wow.
I saw recently in the Spanish press in Telesur, Maduro said that they have recordings of Duque, the president of Colombia, on the phone with Donald Trump, and Donald Trump insisting that they go ahead with the operation, that they had 300 fighters. I guess some of those fighters weren't not able to cross the border into Venezuela because they weren't paid. And that's why Jordan exposed the fact that he had a recording with Guaido, showed the recording with Guaido, him approving the operation, and showing the contract live with Guaido's signature on it, authorizing the 1.5 million be paid to the mercenaries to cross the border and to either kidnap or assassinate Maduro. So they were going to try to kidnap him, bring him to the airport, and send the United States so they get their 50 million from the bounty based on the false charges, or if there was resistance, kill Maduro or any other forces around him. That was the objective. And so there's a direct link now between the chief of security who helped set up Silvercore with Jordan of Donald Trump. And now there's also the recording, which hopefully will be revealed publicly soon, of President Duque of Colombia on the phone with Trump, and Trump urging for them to go through with the operation. So it's not just Guaido, who's just a tool of empire. It's the president of Colombia and it's President Trump himself and the entire imperialist system that has set up the scenario, this failed scenario of almost a Bay of Pig type scenario that happened in Venezuela this past weekend.
Wow.
I mean, this past Sunday night. Yeah.
That is atrocious. So the U.S. empire has clear links to this botched invasion and coup attempt against the Venezuelan people.
Yeah, because Jordan stayed behind in Colombia. He didn't go on with the other fighters. And he said the reason why he didn't go along is because he didn't get paid. And the reason why he's exposing Guaido is because he didn't get paid. So he was upset about a business situation. Guaido pocketed all this money. I think they stole like 90 million from Citgo. and he uses that to pay his fake ministers and deputies. And supposedly he was going to put 1.5 million towards his operation. They didn't follow through, and Jordan was upset. And so he was actually talking with media that were not Chavista media or socialist media. He was talking to journalists in Miami live from the fields of Colombia, saying, here's the, because a lot of people in the opposition now, including extreme opposition, are against Guaido. But yeah, he showed live the signature of Guaido, and then later showed a recording of Guaido, who speaks very good English. He was educated at George Washington University, which is by the State Department, which is heavily infiltrated by the CIA, mind you. But Guaido has a direct link to this, and he's still walking the streets of Venezuela. So how are you going to call Maduro a dictator if he hasn't arrested Guaido yet, when there's strong evidence? The U.S. would use it as a pretext probably for a full-scale invasion, but these mercenaries or terrorists, there was 2 Americans that were captured. They confessed on video. They didn't look hurt at all, because Maduro respects human rights, even people trying to invade his country. But they had a shootout. Some of them died, but there was 2 Americans that they captured who are now confessing that they were told by Jordan that Trump approved this, that Trump's chief of security approved this, and that Silver Corps was working at the behest of Washington directly. And I don't call it the Trump administration, nor in my film, the Embassy Protectors, I'm not going to call them the Trump administration. They're the Trump regime, because it's very important for people to understand. And this is I'm an independent. This is not coming out as a pro-Hillary stance. I'm just saying the facts. Trump lost the popular vote by 3 million. It is a regime because he was not legitimately elected, because in this country we have electoral college. And you don't want to get off topic, but I'll tell you this. Maduro was elected by 67% with 2 opposing candidates from major oppositional parties, not one like in the United States. He still got 67% of the vote with hundreds of international observers. So Maduro is more legitimate, his administration, than the Trump regime.
Wow.
So I call it the Trump regime in the film. I don't call it the Trump administration, because Trump does not have legitimacy that Maduro has. That's just the facts.
I try to do that on this show as well. It is the Maduro administration, Democratic administration, and the Trump regime. Moving on. So as U.S. empire attacks the legitimate democracy and the socialist construction of the people of Venezuela, right here in the United States, African American people are being shot, and the people are getting away with it. I believe February, 2 men hunted down and killed a black man jogging, Ahmaud Arbery. And I understand R Suarez, from an undisclosed location in Georgia today, took part in a demonstration against this atrocity in Jackson, Georgia. Is that correct? Can you tell us more about this?
No, it was actually Jacksonville, Florida, which is about
So you traveled
20 minutes south of Brunswick, which is where the shooting happened against Ahmadia.
So you're from an undisclosed location in Georgia, and you traveled to Jacksonville, Florida, the large city close to where the incident happened. Correct?
Yes, I'm in southern Georgia right now, but I'm going to be moving to Jacksonville soon. And I was at a Jacksonville protest at the courthouse. We were all wearing masks, with a bunch of progressive anti-police brutality groups, coalitions, about 200 comrades. And we're protesting the fact that this gentleman, Ahmad, I believe is his name, was shot and killed in broad daylight in a modern day lynching, filmed 2 months ago, and they've done nothing. Actually, 3 months ago now, February. And so we actually went yesterday on the 26th birthday of this gentleman who's minding his own business, African American, jogging the streets of jogging on a trail that he always went on in Brunswick. And his mother said that he loved life and he had all these great plans for himself. And they shot him down and hunted him like an animal. 2 rednecks. It was a father and son. The father was a former cop, and the police in Brunswick covered it up for 3 months. And then a whistleblower was kind enough to show us the video. So we actually see how they gunned him down. And they refused to press charges. They said they had to wait for a grand jury to convene during the virus, that they had to wait till June. And then because of the public outcry 2 days ago, a day before the protest, they finally arrested them and charged them. So this invention that, under the rules, you can't charge them, it was proven as BS once the public outcry came. And so I went to that protest The first protest I've done since the coronavirus has been going on. I'm an activist. I go when I can, in order to express my indignation and my solidarity with the community, and to show Black and Brown unity and unity of the working class against police brutality. And there was some media there. I'm sure some of it's going to be reported. But yeah, I mean, this is just another example of a police cover-up, and how people of color are treated like animals or worse in this country.
Wow. So you're a working class Peruvian American, doing solidarity work with Venezuela, speaking out against police brutality to this day. Can you talk more about like a little bit of your history, where you come from, what got you into activism?
Yeah, so I'm originally from Boston, Massachusetts. I
Mm-hmm.
left there when I was a child, and I went to live in Vermont, a very progressive part of the country. But what ultimately made me become a socialist was living abroad. So when I was in high school, I was advocating socialism, and it's not like the millennials today who are more radical than it was in the early 2000s. At that time, if I said in my high school I like socialism, and I was discovering Che and socialism already as a teenager, but if I had went around openly and told people, even in progressive Vermont at the time, that I was advocating socialism, they would think I was crazy. Now it's normal to say that you're a socialist, and Bernie helped put that in the narrative. I have my issues with him, but at least he helped put socialism narrative in a positive way. Whether it's real socialism, that can be debated. But back then, to say you're liberal was fine, but to say you're socialist something else. To me, liberal today means centrist, pretty much. But anyways, when I went abroad to South America, and I talked about this on the Real Progressive show the other day, it was the year 2002, and for the same year, actually, of the coup attempt where Chavez was very close to being assassinated. And this was on orders from Washington, when he was ousted for about a day in Caracas. And then that night he was returned to the presidential palace on a helicopter, and 1 million people showed up demanding his return. And then his own brigade from the helicopter came and saved his life. They were about to shoot him. They sent him to an island. They were about to execute him. And so when Chavez returned, that's when he started advocating socialism. But he was elected in 1998, assumed power in 1999. And so at that time, Evo Morales tried to run as president. Actually, his vice presidential pick at the time was somebody whose brothers fought alongside Che in Bolivia in the 1960s. So the first time Evo tried, he lost. The second time he won. So Evo Morales actually in 2006 united with Chavez and was the first indigenous head of state of the Americas since the Columbus conquered the Americas. And so when that happened, you saw, and I was witness to this for a couple of years, a change of consciousness. Prior to my generation, a lot of Latin American people who were predominantly mestizo, which means mixed indigenous and Spanish blood, although there's a lot with African blood, especially in countries like Venezuela, Brazil, and even in the south of Peru. Have you ever heard of the activist rapper Immortal Technique?
Yes, a big fan.
Yeah, I met him, and him and I had a conversation in Philly a few years ago in Spanish, because he was born in Peru and he's Afro-Peruvian. His family are from the south of Peru, in an area actually near where my uncle used to live. But anyways, so there's African people throughout Latin America, especially in Venezuela and Brazil. Chavez himself was part African. But anyways, I believe it's called Zambo when you have all three cultures in your blood. But mestizo, right, predominantly, the predominant populations of Latin or indigenous and Spanish roots, they used to take more pride, prior generations, in their Spanish roots, their European roots. And with the taking down of the Pizarro statue, who was the conquistador or conqueror of Peru, in Lima, in the Peruvian capital where my father was born, when they took down that statue, and when they started having more pride in their indigenous roots, whenever Morales was elected, when Chavez was elected and started implementing socialism and integration of Latin America, including Central and South, when that started happening, you saw a change of consciousness. And also, a lot of the machismo of the past started to fade away. As a matter of fact, the current vice president of Venezuela is a woman of color, Delcy Rodriguez, and actually under Venezuela, it's more democratic in the United States in another way. The vice president is never appointed when a head of state dies, like here in the United States. So when Hugo Chavez died in 2013, there had to be another presidential election, and Maduro, who was his vice president, had won. And so there's a journalist sellout who pretends to be anti-Trump but works with Trump on foreign policy named Jorge Ramos. And it was a very infamous interview that they actually didn't want to get out at CNN. He works for CNN Espanol or CNN in Spanish. But it was a whistleblower revealed the actual interview, the actual footage from the interview he did with Maduro. And you see how he's provoking Maduro. And he's acting like a mercenary. He's showing footage and trying to provoke Maduro and just terrible questions he asked Maduro, clearly upsetting him. And then, of course, that interview was shut down. But it was the Chavistas that wanted the interview out, not CNN, because the interview would show how terrible Jorge was. Jorge was not there doing an interview. He would try to provoke Maduro and make over, as if that was a bad thing. You know what I would have said? I would say, yeah, unlike in the United States, where after Kennedy died, Johnson was automatically appointed, and Johnson was a terrible president. But, you know, here in Venezuela, we actually get elected when our head of state dies. So under the Bolivarian or Venezuelan constitution, they're more democratic in the United States when it comes to that. Who is somebody like Jorge, who's of Mexican descent, who's a complete sellout, to try to judge the democratic process of Venezuela?
Wow. Yeah, I remember that. So it's interesting here in the U.S., especially in the South. You see a racist, Trump, attacking a Mexican reporter, Jorge Ramos, on television. Your thoughts are to defend Jorge Ramos, but Jorge Ramos has viciously attacked the people's democracy and Venezuela. You know, so his class. So even though the vile racist person would attack,
and I have 2 degrees in journalism, Dust, and I'm telling you, that's not journalism. That is not journalism. And a lot of the media, and most of the media in Venezuela, the so-called dictatorship, they're controlled by the opposition, by the extremist elements of the Voluntad Popular, the Popular Will Party in Venezuela, run by sellouts like Lopez and Guaido. They're the ones every day under Chavez and currently under Maduro who call for the assassination of head of state. Or any of these channels shut down? What would happen here in the United States if somebody on CNN said, today we need to go and assassinate Trump? They'd be sent to Guantanamo. They'd probably be executed, right? We had Chomsky say something like that when we interviewed him for my film. But yeah, what would happen here in the United States? And yet we're calling it dictatorship when they're a much more democratic system than here in the United States empire.
So Univision and Jorge Ramos are part of the imperialist media. Fox News, NBC, even NPR. You're not getting the right story. And that's why media sources like this are so important. And
NPR, I was listening to my car the other day on the radio because I couldn't get anything else. You know, bourgeois press, right? And so listening to NPR, and they're saying they're talking to all these people that oppose Putin during Victory Day. It's like you should be recognizing that Putin's parents were survivors of the Nazi invasion of Leningrad. You should be recognizing that Putin is the embodiment. He's not a perfect leader, but he's certainly, if he's not a socialist, he's the embodiment of anti-fascism. And you should recognize the up to 30 million Russians, more than any other nation on earth, that died against the Nazi onslaught. Instead of NPR doing that, they're going around and interviewing these little minority groups of oppositionists to Putin. And that's how they honor Victory Day in Russia? Give me a break.
All right. So let's get back. So you talked about traveling in Latin America and being inspired by movements in Latin America and having that. So what have been your experiences here in the U.S. as far as growing up Peruvian American in the United States?
Yeah, because besides living in Peru, I also lived a couple years in Spain. So I saw how the remnants of the Spanish Empire operate. And actually in Spain, since I left Spain in late 2009, a new left third party emerged out of the Indignados movement, which was very similar to Occupy, and they're called Podemos, and they united with another third left party called Izquierda Unida, or United Left. So you have Podemos, Izquierda Unida, who have taken a lot of position now in the Spanish government that are very progressive. That's a good thing. But still, you have the remnants of imperialism in Spain, and you have some racism. They call people of Latin descent suracaca, which is a very vulgar term. And so I experienced some of that in Spain, and when returning to the United States after living there for 3 years, as I lived in Peru for a couple of years, really seeing, like, for example, I had to go to the doctor in Spain. Even without papers, I didn't have to pay anything, you know? And so I thought, why can't here in the United States, the richest country on earth, far richer than Spain, you know, why can't the United States do things like that? And also I saw the richness of the culture of Peru, the family values, and say, why can't we have that here in the United States? So it made me start to question things living abroad, you know? As a socialist, you know, or even as a Chivista, I would advocate the U.S. government to have programs for students to live abroad, perhaps in Latin America after they graduate from high school for a year. But the U.S. government currently, under its imperialist system, does not want that, right? Because then expose the contradictions. How come in the third world and in the Caribbean there are several nations, Cuba of course as well, which I've been to, that have public health care, that have education covered to PhD where you don't have to go in debt. And here in the United States, we don't have that, right? And then one of the common excuses that these sellout politicians give that receive millions from big pharma is the population's too big. Oh yeah, look at China, right? They have over 1 billion people. They've handled the virus very well, and they have public health care for all their citizens. So why can't we have it here at home? It's clear. It's corruption. It's the capitalist corporatist system.
Wow. Right on. Nothing I can argue with there.
Individually, I've experienced racism, absolutely. Even though, as I mentioned earlier, Vermont is a progressive state, I was the only Latino in high school, and I was severely bullied until I learned how to fight back. I learned how to wrestle. I learned some martial arts, and later I learned boxing. So yeah, I mean, the only way to deal with bullies is fighting back. But I experienced racism growing up there in predominantly white areas. And not only that, when I went to the South, my father, who's a Peruvian immigrant, it's important to mention that the liberator for like several South American nations is the Venezuelan liberator Bolivar, who inspired Chavez. In the year 2000, I was a teenager then in the town of Salisbury, North Carolina, in your state.
Yeah.
And
a few times.
And two instances happened. One I wasn't there for, but I can tell you, two instances of racism happened then. So first off, my father and me, we had a gentleman come visit us who was a white man, and so my and this gentleman went to a Italian restaurant locally, and as soon as we walked in, the place was pretty much empty. They told us it's full, you got to go. Like we couldn't even go to the bar. So that's racial profiling. And not only that, my father told me later on he was pulled over by an officer who kept driving near him. This white officer, like trying to make sure he was Latino. My father had a mustache at the time, and so he eventually pulled over my father. But yeah, there's racial profiling either by restaurant owners or the police. Things that you go through and things that I witnessed as a teenager that helped me become an activist as well. And learning about Che and other revolutionaries and socialism was always very attractive to me.
Okay. So the name, if people looked at the name of the show, I said U.S. Workers Solidarity, South. Do you see a connection between the discrimination you've seen both as a worker and a person of color in connection with the assault of the people of Venezuela and other anti-imperialist countries?
Well, first off, if anybody sees the documentary, and it's on Prime and other outlets, by Oliver Stone, which is going to be a big influence on our film, called South of the Border. It came out in 2009. It talks about what you just talked about. Like they interview the socialist, Tariq Ali, and Tariq says, I want to see, he predicted this. He said, I want to see Latin American people in the United States respond to Chavism, and what a threat to the U.S. empire that would be. I'm not saying verbatim what he said, but that's pretty much what he said. And he's absolutely right about that. Since that film came out and since the truth has got to the Latin people, including myself here in the U.S. empire, we felt inspired by Chavism. The United States has been so desperate to call Venezuela a threat. Not just Trump, Obama, and Bush Jr. prior to him also backed one way or another economic sanctions against Venezuela, which under international law actually is a form of warfare. But also, when they talk about police beating up protesters, these are the rich, white, elite rioters that are killing people in the streets of Caracas in Venezuela back then. And the police were defending themselves. In most of the cases where there was abuse, the police were arrested, and Maduro encouraged those arrests. But let me tell you, the police in Venezuela are not like the police here in the United States.
Hold on,
the police in the United States originated as slave hunters. Go ahead.
All right, let me ask you this question. So many people would say, so you're inspired by Venezuela, and you see ultra left, usually middle class leftists will say, well, aren't there police in Venezuela? Like, isn't there police repression in Venezuela? And how would you respond to that?
It is a bourgeois question, and how I would respond to that is I would say that the police in Venezuela are defending the workers, and a lot of them come from the working class themselves and are people of color. So the role of the Chavista police is to defend from imperialist tools who are these white elites that are doing acts of sabotage within the country. So you can't talk about police brutality in the same context when you're talking about the social state of Venezuela versus the imperialist state of the United States. And something else I wanted to mention, there's evidence now out of Greensboro, North Carolina, that some of the weapons that were used in this operation that we talked about earlier came from there. So not only is there a direct link with Trump, there's a direct link. Actually, we know what part of the United States a lot of these weapons came from. So even though there was Venezuelan exiles that took part besides the U.S. mercenaries, the U.S. was conducting step by step this operation. They didn't get their funds in the end. They want to expose it, fine, but it still does not take away the role of the United States played in this, as they've had in countless other coup attempts. Like we said at the Venezuelan embassy last year, coup failed, coup failed. You know, they're failing every time because the will of the Venezuelan people, who predominantly support the Chavistas, is prevailing. And the union between the civilian militias and the fishermen who discovered these mercenaries entering the country and the Bolivarian armed forces in Venezuela, they're all working together to protect their country. And there's only about 300 Venezuelans that contracted the virus, and they're taking all the precautions. They're protecting salaries. They're not making people pay rent like here in the United States. So certainly their system in many ways is superior to here. So who are we to judge? Who are we to dare to call them a dictatorship? With what moral authority can we say something like that?
All right. So quick, I'm trying to make a point with a question. So quick, yes or no. Do you think the police in Venezuela could have killed somebody in broad, you think people could track down and kill somebody in broad daylight and get away with it for months and go sleep in their beds? Like what happened with Ahmad? Would that happen in Venezuela? Do police killings against black people happen in Venezuela without any repercussions?
Absolutely not. No.
So that's right there is something to be inspired by what the revolution in Venezuela, the Bolivarian revolution, did. And one reason to stand in solidarity is the class nature of the police. Can you tell us other things of how you were inspired, other accomplishments of the Bolivarian revolution in Venezuela?
Yes, I can tell you about Evo Morales in Bolivia. He made Bolivia, which was the second poorest country in 2006 in all the hemisphere after Haiti, the number one country in economic growth. And he did that with socialism. He did that by raising the taxes on the multinationals operating in the country that were trying to extract lithium and other minerals. He was starting to business with the Chinese investments in the country, which the United States didn't like. And so who was the people that were opposing him? Phalangist, fascist, white Bolivians from Santa, what's the name of that town? Santa Cruz, near where Che was killed, like Camacho. These are the guys that were imposing the coup that happened in Bolivia. But what was inspiring was all the moves that Evo Morales was making, the unity of the South American nations, Korea and Ecuador, the Argentine, Kirchner, Fernandez, administration, all these governments popping up, Lula in Brazil, Lugo in Paraguay. So at the time, they called it the pink tide in the early 2000s, how they reunited with Chavez. And there's been some reversals. There's been some rightists that have taken over. But I'm still optimistic that the Chavistas, the Bolivarians, and the socialists in the South, in the global South, and in Central and South America in particular, can rise up once again. And when these imperialist invasions fail, it just solidifies and strengthens the people. It's like Che Guevara said once to a U.S. politician after Bay of Pigs. He said, I want to thank you for the Bay of Pigs because nothing solidifies the people like a U.S.-backed invasion. And the U.S. empire is starting to be in decay, and there's other regions of the world that are rising up, including the global South.
Right on. I had a contact who visited Venezuela, and I like to make like really sharp examples that working people can understand. And she was saying how in Venezuela, when she visited there, that they had free daycare at some of the working facilities, places where folks had to go. They had free daycare. And another interesting thing they said was that in this place where they had free daycare at the work, they would allow a 2-hour break for nursing mothers to go nurse their children in Venezuela. And just as a working person in the United States, I like to say we are Venezuela. Like what they're doing there is stuff we can have here that's being stolen from us. The same enemy we have that's stopping us from having healthcare, education, is the same people trying to put down the people of Venezuela and the achievements that they have got. Can you talk more on that sentiments, or maybe you have more examples of positive things going on there?
Yeah, I actually had something in mind. I was going to write it out, but sometimes you lose your train of thought. Can you just reiterate the question once more?
So basically, the people in Venezuela have healthcare, education. I mentioned specifically breaks
Oh, now
for.
I remember. Now I remember what I wanted
Yeah.
to. Now I
Okay.
remember what I wanted to say, Dust. I wanted to
Okay.
ask you a question.
Okay.
So are you aware, Cuba, for example, who are of course very solidified with Venezuela? Are you aware that they have a lung cancer vaccine?
Wow. I think I've seen lots of reports. I stay up with a lot of Chicano media and stuff, and they're always putting in anti-imperialist media. And I saw that Cuba helped with the coronavirus, and Cuba helped the transmission of mother to
Well,
child
literally, there's
AIDS.
Chinese vessels trying to bring aid right now to
Mm-hmm.
Cuba, and the United States every day is blocking it. And Cuba, just like Venezuela, has incredible healthcare, and they're dealing with the crisis very well. But ever since the 1990s, even during the so-called special period when the Soviet Union fell and Cuba lost some aid and they had to invest in tourism, back in the 90s, they invented this lung cancer vaccine. And so Cuba, even though it's been under blockade for decades and is of the third world, has a higher life expectancy than the United States, lower infant mortality rate. And this is a nation where people heavily smoke cigars. And so this lung cancer vaccine has prevented that. And also they have their own medicine now to deal with the coronavirus. They're working with the Chinese on that. They sent doctors to Italy and Nicaragua and other parts of the world during this virus. So those are the innovations of socialism. Today on Victory Day of all days, how the socialists were defeating the Nazis. A lot of the innovations of socialism we see today here in Latin America through their I'm here in the Americas through their democratic revolutions and their democratic processes.
One of the things that I talk with people out on the road, people, like I say, I'm a truck driver. That's what I do like most of the week. And it's my one day off. But when I talk with folks out on the road, a lot of people are trying to buy a new house. They're trying to get a house. Like I myself, I'm living in a trailer. I'm trying to get and buy my house. And an interesting fact that I found out is home ownership in China is like 90%. And I believe it's similar in
Really?
Latin American countries, in Venezuela. Like just the idea, like you talk to workers in the U.S. that work for years and years and years, and then get these mortgages that with high interest and predatory loans, just trying to get into the middle class from the working class to the middle class. And Maduro,
Well, even how the
Mhm.
UBI operated was class warfare, right? I mean, go ahead,
Uh-huh.
make your point.
Maduro, did he celebrate building 1 million houses that were given to people? No high interest, no predatory loans,
Yes,
given to the people. Over 1 million homes.
there was homes given to the people in Cuba, and also 1959 when the revolution first started, agrarian reform. A lot of lands were given back to the workers and the peasants as part of socialism. And actually, Kennedy after that, because he was afraid of the spread of the Cuban Revolution to Latin American nations through the Alliance for Progress, was advocating agrarian reform in other Latin nations. Johnson reversed that later on, but let me tell you, UBI or universal basic income, even here in the United States during this crisis, is a form of class warfare, and I'll tell you why. A lot of times, when actually never in a single case that I know of, have these UBIs been targeted to help people pay rent. All the money that was given, millions from the Treasury to the banks, was used to help some people pay in some states their mortgages, or they would have to have a little more time to pay off their mortgages. So those people that own homes, right, have to pay a certain amount per month. But those who have to pay rent, have you seen cancellation in rent? I mentioned earlier for the next 6 months, actually, but they were announced this, I believe, months ago, so a month ago. So at least for the next 5 months, no Venezuelan has to pay rent. Their wages are protected while they can't go to work. That's for non-essentials. This is a third world country, again, under U.S. blockade, just like Cuba, and it's doing things that we, the richest country in the world, cannot do. So these are the contradictions we have in the U.S. imperial system. You know, I've written books about this. These contradictions, we have to face them. We have to confront them. And we have to build a revolutionary scenario. And not just a physical revolution, but a revolution of consciousness. As we saw in the past decade, the lifting of the consciousness of Latin American people. This has to happen within the U.S. empire itself for this empire to finally fall.
All right. I think I'm going to mention, maybe I'll mention you a hard question. I've been nice to you. So earlier you mentioned how Bernie Sanders helped popularize socialism in a way. He also called Maduro a tyrant, and the Democrats in general had Guaido in one of their meetings and gave him a standing ovations. Do you think?
Well, actually, it wasn't a Democratic meeting. It was the State of the Union.
State of the Union.
And in the State of the Union, Nancy Pelosi and other Democratic leaders had applauded this guy. And this was after he was ousted from the National Assembly, actually by vote. His own party voted him out to no longer head the National Assembly. And they're still recognizing him as the president of Venezuela. This is ridiculous. Guaido can't even show his face because the people hate him for being such a traitor, trying to get his nation invaded, backing sanctions that have killed tens of thousands of Venezuelans. So you're not going to see me supporting Bernie when it comes to those things, or the Democratic establishment in general, and even some rank and file or new members of the Democrats that call themselves socialists, like AOC. I've been critical of her. Back when we were at the embassy last year, Pamela Anderson tweeted that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is pro-regime change in Venezuela, and she's right about that. And she was referring to party leadership who were pro-regime change. And not only that, AOC met with the coup plotters of Bolivia that showed up at her office in New York. And then when her own constituents tried to meet up with AOC to tell her how the fascist coup was wrong, that even Bernie was condemning at the time, she had them thrown out of the office. So this is not socialism. So I agree with you. What I was saying is that Bernie is putting into the narrative, not that he's advocating real socialism.
Okay, so we're getting close to we've been on for 37 minutes. We're getting close to it. Maybe we can end it on like a hopeful question. So if it's not people like Bernie Sanders or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez that's going to lead the revolution or lead us to fight for what we need in this country, who is? Like, what should we be doing?
Well, I'll tell you this. Tulsi Gabbard and Ilhan Omar in the Congress, they have superior points of view when it comes to foreign policy than AOC or Bernie. So I'm not saying their policies are perfect, but they definitely have come from a superior position, even though they don't call themselves socialists, right? That's ironic. Like, for example, Ilhan Omar confronted Elliot Ainberg. She was a convicted war criminal absolved by Reagan. She confronted him. So how can you want us to approve you as the envoy of Venezuela if you have a history of war crimes in Central America? So she was doing the job that the Congress people should have done and that socialists and anti-imperialists should have done. The AOC in the beginning talked about, getting rid of the military budget and, and things like that. But certainly since she's gone into the House, she's sold out and she's deferred to Pelosi publicly. And there should be more of an outcry of that. Like groups like DSA, who endorsed AOC, they should have presented their endorsement of her then. But the DSA, just like that ISO, has petty bourgeois leadership and has infiltrators and, has fake Trotskyists, not real Trotskyists, that infiltrate these organizations and that do have a pro-imperialist stance. On that, when I debated Caleb, I agreed with them. So yes, I mean, these groups need to get behind anti-imperialism if they're truly socialist.
Right on. So what are some ways that we can grow, like obviously the media, like we're doing here today, talking about this, getting this message out of here, your YouTube channel, which people subscribe to, and Embassy Protectors. Like, what are some ways we can combat this imperialist narrative? Like, maybe talk about your documentary that you're helping.
Yes, the documentary is a good way to expose empire. It's an excellent way to do that. Oliver Stone, as I mentioned earlier, came out with South of the Border. That's great. Michael Moore's done great things. I mean, even Jesse Ventura, who's currently running for president, this is not an endorsement. I'm just putting this out there. He's running for president with the Greens. Even Jesse Ventura once had said, when Oliver Stone came out with that film, that it should be in the curriculum, that all American students should see that. And I agree. The American youth who have not been fully indoctrinated or brainwashed yet need to see the truth of what's going on in Latin America. So building that consciousness and educating is important, just like going to a protest and rallying is important.
Right on. Do you have any final words or stuff to say to the people watching here, and we'll watch this later on?
I just hope that you get educated. You know, go on websites like Popular Resistance. Go and see my article about Che Guevara on there, and showing the CIA and Nazi connections behind the Bolivarian right wing groups that ultimately took him out, and that you killed off almost all the remaining guerrilla fighters. Evo Morales came decades later and fulfilled Che's legacy, the legacy of liberators, the legacy of Tupac Amaru and the Inca warriors against the Spanish imperialists. And we have the U.S. imperialists here. So people need to get educated on that and realize that this is not coming. Don't listen to corporate media. This is not coming from anti-Americanism. Maduro loves the American people. He's a working class man. He's a former bus driver. He has love for the working class throughout the world. So this is not coming from anti-Americanism. It's coming from anti-imperialism. And no matter who's in the White House in the current system, until there's a true revolution from either of the principal parties, they're going to continue the imperialist agenda as a foreign policy. And the media is going to continually back and lie and omit facts so that you and the American people do not know the truth. But you, the American people, if you watch my documentary, if you watch films like Oliver Stone's, hopefully that'll inspire you to act, not just make you more aware, but inspire you to help make a difference in the society that's supposed to be democratic, so that the U.S. empire will cease to exist.
Right on. It was great having you on today. You can come and continue to comment after we go. Thank you.
All right, brother. Take care.
So that was R Suarez, co-director of a upcoming documentary. You can follow his YouTube channel, Embassy Protectors. Great conversation. So I'm going to keep reading comments that were here. Wow, I got so many comments. Thanks everyone participating. If you like the show, subscribe, share this out right now. Share this in Facebook groups, make this a bigger conversation. What's up, Space Communists? Red Denorian, happy V-Day from Watcher in Britain. MR Michael, MW, RIP, American Empire. Lincoln Knight Yankee, good afternoon. Good afternoon to you, brother, Lincoln Knight Yankee. Someone I encouraged to get on here recently, Albert Mendoza. Nice to see you here. Arctic Angel. Zach Campbell, thank you for the compliment. Another organization. As a student activist in Greensboro, North Carolina, Triad, Jobs with Justice. And they do a show, You Gotta Laugh to Keep from Crying. Older union activists. Beautiful show. I recommend people subscribing to the North Carolina Triad, Jobs with Justice YouTube channel. They have very few subscribers, and they have some of the best work on a lot of issues, specifically in the labor movement and stuff around that's going on in the South. So that was my intro, my interview with R Suarez. Hopefully that's a good resource. Maybe I'll cut that out and make a smaller video with just that section and post it here. So I'm going to get into the news section of my show. I saw an article by Common Dreams, and they were talking about how a health clinic that administers help to mostly Native American people, they made a call out to receive tests, to receive aid. They're having trouble. Native American people in this country are kept in poverty and continue to be exploited to this day. And because of that, they're having some of the highest numbers with COVID-19. So this struggling medical facility, which helps mostly Native American people. They asked for help, and what showed up at their door was not tests, was not masks, was not hand sanitizer and other necessities, was not PPE equipment. Body bags. Body bags were sent to this health facility. That is a metaphor, an understanding of the outright carelessness. The and they make it look like they're dumb. They make it look like Trump makes it look like he's a bumbling buffoon. He doesn't realize what he's doing, but they know exactly what they're doing by making the profits of the medical industry, making the profits of manufacturing being put above our lives. Us, the working class, the essential workers, people of color are dying from COVID-19. And they're absolutely callous. And this, meanwhile, in Venezuela, which they're attacking, they had very few deaths. They have the medical supplies. The indigenous people in Venezuela from a Bolivarian socialist revolution are not receiving body bags like they hear in the United States. They are receiving medical care. They're stopping the spread of the virus. China has been one of the best countries stopping the spread of the virus, shut down whole cities, brought in massive food campaigns with truck drivers bringing in food. And they're over it now. And we, now in the United States, you see reactionary right-wing protesters going in to Capitol buildings with guns, demanding that their petty bourgeois businesses be able to profit and continue to profit. Callous to the people that will die. This country is reopening up and more people will die. Thousands of people will die. We need to stand in solidarity with the global South and be inspired by their revolutions in China and Venezuela, Evo Morales' Bolivia, and the accomplishments they made can be made right here, in communities of colors that are plagued by police brutality, and the working class in general, denied housing, education in this country. We can have socialist revolution. We can have socialist mobilization. And it's not the Democrats that are going to do it. It is we, the people, come together and build mass organizations like they did with the Communist Party in the 30s. On a positive note, we mentioned how Maduro was a bus driver. And I really identify with him as a truck driver in North Carolina. And Venezuela, workers can be president. Everyone knows I'm a Howie Hawkins supporter. I don't believe in the lies of the Democratic Party. Even though Bernie Sanders may have made the term socialism more popular in a positive way, his socialism is tied to a Eurocentric view, is tied to a bourgeois view. They're not taking on the oil companies. They're not taking on the people that control this empire, that attack us here, workers and people of color in the United States. And they're not attacking, they're attacking the people here in the United States, the working class and people of color. And they're also attacking the people in Venezuela and anti-imperialist countries in general. And the Democrats, even the Squad and Bernie Sanders, are in on this. We need to build independent political power. And it's my opinion that the Green Party in the United States is helping to do that on the electoral front. I support Howie Hawkins, who is also backed by Ajamu Baraka. one of the leading anti-imperialist forces, and one of the authors of Black Agenda Report, is backing Howie Hawkins. I back Howie Hawkins. Howie Hawkins just recently appointed or asked to be his running mate a working class African American woman and truck driver, Angela Walker. So inspired. There was memes going out, put workers in the White House. Howie Hawkins, a former Teamster, and now his vice president working as a truck driver, day cab driver down in South Carolina, Angela Walker. In the picture, they had on her on the website announcing her as the vice president of Howie Hawkins' campaign. She had large picture earrings of Shirley Chisholm, the historic African American female candidate who worked in the who tried to lead an insurgent campaign like Bernie Sanders in the Democratic primaries and was put down. Carrying on her legacy, a worker, I'm very happy that Howie Hawkins has announced Angela Walker to be his running mate. Also leading the left unity and working class march. She's also organized with the Socialist Party USA. Howie Hawkins has the candidacy of both Socialist Party USA and the Green, and is now the presumptive nominee. Most likely, I will be voting a former Teamster and a truck driver, an African American female truck driver working from South Carolina, and the ticket. And I won't be voting for Biden, the rapist. Biden, the rapist. Biden, the racist. Biden, the pro-busing. And I definitely won't be voting for the absolute racist Donald Trump. There's another choice. We can vote for workers on the Green Party ticket. Red Durian says, I personally support Jesse Ventura for the Green Party. That's cool. Anybody outside building power, outside the system of the Democrats, the imperialist Democrats, the racist Democrats, should be looked at. And right now, so the most popular ticket that's going to be on the ballot coming up will be Howie Hawkins. And I'm glad anti-busing. That's absolutely correct. Lincolnite Yankee. We going on about 53 minutes. Anybody in the comment section? Got good participation today. I see Embassy Protectors is here. That's where you can get to his page and subscribe. Lincolnite Yankee. Red, any questions? Anybody want something for me to talk about? MLUK, Joe Biden is so dangerous. He's interested in upping the new Cold War. Absolutely. The Democrats, Biden, even Sanders are in on the new Cold War of attacking the progress and the people of China, Nicaragua, Venezuela. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez met with the people that helped take Evo Morales out of office in Bolivia. Red Dorian's giving praise to Embassy Protectors. R Suarez, thank you. That was a great interview. Jesse Ventura wrote a book dedicated to Che. That's very good and interesting. Been on here for a while. If there's nobody on there wanting to talk about other subjects, I'm going to go right into my closing conclusion. Just like Maduro, a truck driver, was voted as president. As voted as president of the socialist democratic country of Venezuela. We need working class power in the United States, working class representation. To get working class means healthcare, education, um, a virus task force that won't have us die in higher numbers. As I go around this country as a truck driver, I see the effects of deindustrialization, the continued morbid nature of imperialism. And Lenin described the current state of, of capitalism, imperialism, monopoly capitalism, morbid capitalism, dying capitalism. And in the United States, the banking class has continued and fomented their power, continue to grab power to the point where the profits of the elites of the banker class have almost no actual reality on the economy that we have. Wall Street is just a money grabbing scheme, stealing money from workers. And in this, they're okay. They're no longer the elites in this country, the banking class, are no wholly connected with manufacturing. So they don't care if manufacturing fails. They don't care if we lose our jobs. They don't care if they move jobs to lower wage areas. We see the deindustrialization of the United States. And I see that as a truck driver. I go from rural towns. I see boarded up towns. From the Black Belt South and South Carolina to the Midwest, around the Mississippi and America's heartland, I see I see towns boarded up, old beautiful government facilities built in the 1800s in this country, and Civil War monuments to the Union that helped fight the Second American Revolution in this country and stop slavery. In John Brown's Kansas, where John Brown fought in Kansas to stop slavery from going there, there's poverty because of the deindustrialization in the United States. I see boarded up towns, boarded up businesses. I see towns, like I said, from the Black Belt South and South Carolina to the heartland of the United States. You'll see these towns where all they got in that town is a payday loan place offering predatory loans, stealing money out of the community, gambling dens, sweepstakes place, another way of robbing the community, already poor community, robbing the community. And the introduction, I say that purposely, it's not, how is it a coincidence that the pharmaceutical industry is able to make all these profits off the suffering of people with the opioid crisis? The same communities are being boarded up and given predatory high interest loans. Now we have the opioid crisis killing people. Just like in the cities and the communities of African American communities in the 80s, where the first deindustrialization struck there, and the CIA introduced crack cocaine to criminalize the people, to take those people out of the economy. Our economy is more similar to that of Nazi Germany than it is when the United States was rising and expanding as a power, an industrial power. It now represents a decaying society, a morbid society that is killing its own population. The only thing it cares about is the profits of a few, the profits of the oil banking class. And their actions and their government reflect that. And it is in our interest, the working class interest, the oppressed communities in the United States, to not join up and join their militaries. They'll go kill other poor and brown people around the world. It is in our interest to fight right here, to build coalitions, to get out to your neighbors and tell what's going on, to expose the lies of the empire. Stand in solidarity with the people in the global South. and fight for a new future, a future of socialism, an economy rationally planned for the benefit of the working class, not for the benefit of the profits of the super rich. We can build a new America, an American free of class exploitation, racial exploitation. We can have a better future. Thank you. All power to the people.